Hey guys, welcome back. We're here for another chapter of Frindle. We are going to hop right in and start with chapter 5, The Report. By lunchtime the next day, Nick had a bad feeling in the pit of his stomach. Seventh period was coming. He was going to have to stand up in front of Miss Granger's class. The eyes of everyone in class would be glued to his face, and Miss Granger's eyes would be cranked up to full maximum punch power. He looked over at his notes again and again. The first English dictionary, the growth of the English language, William Shakespeare, words from French to German, new words, old words, new inventions, Anglo-Saxon words, Latin and Greek roots, American English. It all became one big jumble in his mind. And his grand plan from the night before, in the harsh fluorescent lights of the school day, it seemed impossible. What is it with the clocks in the school? When you're planning to go to the carnival after school, the clocks in every class practically run backwards, and the school day lasts for about 3 weeks. But if you have to go to the barber or go shopping for clothes after school, zip, the whole day is over before you can blink. And today, after lunch, periods 5 and 6 went by into just 2 ticks. And the 7th period bell rang. Miss Granger walked into the classroom, took 4 steps to her desk at the side of the room, flipped open her attendance book, glanced out at the class, and made 2 little check marks. Then, looking up at Nick, she said, "I think we have a little report to begin our class today. Nicholas?" 15 seconds into 7th period, and Nick was on stage. This lady plays for keeps, he thought. He gulped, grabbed his crumpled note cards out of his book bag, and walked to the front of the room. He stood next to the giant dictionary on the table, and Miss Granger walked to the back of the classroom and sat primly on a tall stool next to bookcases. She was wearing her blue uniform. Taking a deep breath, Nick began. Well, the first thing I learned is that the first English dictionary, Miss Granger interrupted. "Excuse me, Nicholas, but does your report have a title?" Nick looked blankly at her. "A title? No, I didn't make a title. Class, please remember to include a title whenever you prepare an oral or a written report. Now please, go on, Nicholas." She smiled and nodded at it. Nick began again. Looking right at Mrs. Granger, he said, "The dictionary." A couple of kids thought it was funny, but Nick played it straight. He just kept talking. A lot of people think that the first English dictionary was put together in the 1700s by a man named Samuel Johnson. He lived in London, England, and he was real smart, and he wrote a lot of books, and he wanted all of the other smart people to have a good dictionary to use. So he made one. But there were other dictionaries before his. The thing that was different about Johnson's dictionary was its size. First of all, it had over 43,000 words in it. The class made a bunch of noise that began with the number ooh, oh, wow, and stuff like that. And Nick lost his concentration. He glanced up at Mrs. Granger, expecting to see those eyes drilling a hole in him, but they weren't. They were almost friendly, in a teachery kind of way. She shushed the class and said, "Go on, Nicholas. That's a fine beginning." Nick almost smiled, but he saw all the kids staring at him, so he gripped his note cards even tighter and jumped back in. The other thing that Samuel Johnson did was special was to choose the words he thought were the most important, and then give lots of examples showing how the words got used by people. For example, he showed how the word take could be used 113 different ways. Nick's report went on smoothly for 12 minutes. Nick was surprised at how easy it was to stand there and talk about this stuff. And At the end of the first 5 minutes, Miss Granger had to stop Nick and say, "Class, it's not good manners to yawn out loud or put your heads down on your desk when someone is giving an oral report." No one in the class cared a little bit about the report, except Miss Granger. Every time Nick glanced up, she was smiling, and her eyes were not the least bit icy or sharp. She was eating this stuff up, listening and nodding, and every once in a while she would say, "Very good point," or "Yes, that's exactly right." But the next time looked up and saw Miss Granger sneaking a look at her watch. 18 minutes gone. Maybe his idea was going to work after all. Time for phase 2. Reaching into his book bag, Nick pulled out the red dictionary he had bought from home, the one most kids had, the one Miss Granger said they should use. Nick said, "This is the dictionary that I use at home for my vocabulary work. And I opened it up last night and to the very front page, and right there I found out a lot about how dictionaries were made, right in this book. So I thought some of the ideas would be good as part of my report. It says here, Nicholas." Nick looked up. Miss Granger got off her stool and its wooden legs and made a screech on the linoleum. Heads snapped to attention and the class was alert again. Miss Granger smiled, raised her eyebrows, and pointed at her watch. "Nicholas, I think the class should read that at home themselves." Now, John's hand went up in the air and Miss Granger's nodded and said, "But I don't have that dictionary at home." "Miss Granger, I have the blue one." And several other kids immediately said, "Yeah, me too." Miss Granger tried not to show that she was annoyed. "Very well, Nick, but it shouldn't take too long. We have other things to do today." Nick kept his eyes open wide and nodded, adjusted his glasses on his nose, and began to read. Without question, this modern American dictionary is one of the most surprisingly complex and profound documents ever created, for it embodies unparalleled etymological detail reflecting not only superb lexicographic scholarship, but also the dreams and speech and imaginative talents of millions of people over thousands of years. For every person who has ever spoken or written in English has had a hand in making it. It was a long article and the kids were bored to death, but no one looked bored at all. Every kid in the room knew that the period was more than half over, and Nick's report wasn't just a report, it was the greatest of time wasters he had ever invented. Miss Granger knew it too. She had edged around from the back of the room to the side now where there were windows. Nick glanced up at her now and then as he read each time, Miss Granger's eyes clicked up on new power level. After 18 minutes, Nick's best non-stop reading, her eyes were practically burning holes in the chalkboard behind him. There was only 10 minutes left of 7th period when he took a breath to start a new paragraph. Miss Granger cut him off. "That's a fine place to stop, Nicholas. Class, let's all give him a round of applause for his report." The applause didn't last long. As Nick took his big book bag and notes and sat down, Miss Granger's eyes went back to almost normal. She actually smiled at him. "Although your report was a little long," she said, to let that sink in. She paused to let that sink in. "It was quite good. And isn't it fascinating that English has more different words than any other language used anywhere in the world?" She pointed at her large dictionary. "That one book contains the definitions of more than 450,000 words. Now, wasn't I right, Nicholas? All this will mean is so much more since you learned about it on your own." Miss Granger was beaming at him. Nick sank lower in his chair. This was worse than writing the report, worse than standing up and giving it. He was being treated like the teacher's pet, and he had a feeling she was doing it on purpose. His reputation was in great danger, so he launched another question. He raised his hand, and he didn't wait for Miss Granger to call on him. Yeah, but I still don't really get the idea of why words all mean different things. Like, who says that dog means that things go woof and wag its tail? Well, who says so? Miss Granger took the bait. Who says dog means dog? Well, you do, Nicholas. You and I and everyone in this class and this school and this town and this state and this country, we all agree that if we lived in France, we would agree that the right word for a hairy four-legged creature was a different word, chien. It sounds like she-in, but it means D-O-G, dog. What does dog mean to you and me? And in Germany, they say Hund, and so on around the globe. But if all of us in this room decided to call the creature something else, and if everyone else did too, then, well, that's what it would be called. And that day, it would be written in the dictionary that way. We decide what goes in that book. She pointed to the giant dictionary. She looked right at Nick and smiled again. Then Miss Granger went on. But of course, that dictionary was worked on by hundreds of very smart people for many years. So as far as we are concerned, the dictionary is the law. Laws can be changed, of course, but only if they need to. There may be new words that need to be made, and ones in this book have been put there for good reason. Miss Granger took a look at the clock. 8 minutes left. Now then, for today, you were to have done the exercises beginning on page 12 in your All Words Alive book. Please get out your papers. Sarah, will you read the first sentence, identify the mistake, and then tell us how you corrected it? Miss Granger jammed a whole day's worth of work into 8 minutes. It was a blur. Verbs and nouns and prepositions, and yes, there was another homework assignment. Nick didn't try to sidetrack Mrs. G again. He had slowed her down a little bit, but had he stopped her? No way. She was unstoppable, at least for today. All right, so our question that I want you to think about today is, what exactly does Miss Granger mean when she says dog means dog? Because we all agree it does. What does that mean? So that's something that I want you to think about, and then find somebody to explain what you think that means, that in different countries, and that was the example Miss Granger gives, is in different countries and different languages, we have different words that mean, different names for animals or different names for different things, but words have the values that we give them, and that's something that I often say in class. Words are neither good nor bad. They have the value that we place on them. So what does she mean by dog means dog? Because we all agree that it does. Curious to hear your answers. Have a good day, guys.